I'm 27F and my husband Jake, fake name, is 27M. My Mills always had some strange behavior towards my husband, but I'm only just fully realizing how weird, putrid, and inappropriate she actually is because of what I recently just walked into. I guess looking back now, I sort of see signs that I didn't see before, and I really regret not trying to protect my husband more or try to say something before. But it's all unfortunately in hindsight. I always just thought that's sort of how his family did things, and I never really thought it was my place to say anything. But first, some backstory. My husband and I have been together for 10 years. We started dating in our senior year. Back in high school, my husband used to play football and was working his way up to getting a scholarship. He always told me that he didn't actually want the scholarship. He said that he always felt pressured from his parents. His dad was the top dog back in the day and got the scholarship and even played pro for a bit before starting up his own real estate company. His mom, Barb, just sort of became this trophy wife. She was the pretty blonde cheerleader GF that everyone wanted to be and everyone wanted to date. Anyways, I saw glimpses of the way his parents pressured him when we were younger. They forced him into really tough, demanding, and regulative schedule. His mom would actually touch his abs and tell him that he looked good, or she wished his dad still looked like that. It was awkward, but it was sort of regular, and Jake never said anything. He just sort of laughed it off. And after we started getting serious, Jake wanted to play football less and was looking at starting up trade school to go up north. His parents hated that. And I remember him telling me that his parents hated the influence I had on him, and blamed me for the fact that he was skipping practice. Because he was skipping practice and not following this strict dictatorship regime anymore, he may or may not have lost a few pounds, and so sometimes his parents would even tell him that he thinned out and looked like a stick. So it made him feel shitty about himself. Other times, his mom would point out his washboard abs or his hot six-pack. Yeah, she used the word hot with her only son. Now that I think of it, she actually said some weird things after my husband and I started doing the deed as horny little love bugs, as if she was creeping on us or something. She once said, "I know what you're doing behind the furnace." Which is funny because we went behind there to do the deed, so we aren't in the living area in the basement. So she must have either heard, which is highly unlikely, or she was peeking through some hole somewhere. Anyways, that was always weird. And to top it all off, she always kissed him on the lips. I mean, to this day. Well, not anymore because we aren't talking to her. But for real. A grown-ass man kissing his mother on the lips. Oh, and she'd walk around with her bra and underwear on around the house. Even when I was there. It's like she was trying to show off her body or something. I mean, she looked good for her age. She didn't work for a living, she went to yoga and Pilates every day, so yeah. And I'm pretty sure she had a boob job. But anyways, it was weird. But particularly after we told them we were expecting our first, then she really got weird and started asking really inappropriate questions, and I caught her snooping around our place at one point. We hosted a family dinner at one point to tell everyone about the pregnancy, and she had gone upstairs to use one of our guest washrooms. Well, I had quite a bit of water to drink, and being pregnant, I had to relieve myself, so I had gone upstairs to go use our bathroom in our master suite, and I found my Mill snooping through my side table. And if you know anything, you know not to snoop through anyone's side table because you never know what sort of treats or trinkets and secret delights you might find. I'm like, Barb? I knew what she had seen in there, and she kind of just acted like in denial, and she said she was looking for Tylenol. So then I told her that it's downstairs above the stove and that Jake can get it for her. And she didn't even apologize or look unfazed. She just sort of giggled and went downstairs. And I'm like, hey you. So I tell Jake later that night, and he's like, that's really weird. Why would she do that? And I'm like, yeah. What did she expect to find? I'm like, she's been here so many times, I'm sure she knows where the Tylenol is. He kind of just wrote it off as something his weird mother did and didn't really say anything after that. Then shortly after that, she started bringing gifts over. On one time in particular, she brought me over a gift bag with little face masks and nail polishes and slippers, but then when Jake went to open his, he saw that it was a certain adult toy specifically for men that they put a certain body part in for solo time. And she's looking at him with a big huge smile on his face, and she says, "This is for when, Op, is too pregnant to take care of you." And I was like, And Jake was like, "Mom. WTF. And she's like, "It's the in thing for guys out there now." And Jake stuffed it back in the bag and was like, "Thanks but no thanks, that's extremely inappropriate." And she was like, "Whoa. I'm not trying to step on toes. I've been there before. I know what it's like to try to get things working when you're 8 to 9 months pregnant. I just want to make sure you're taken care of." Then he's like, "Okay. That's enough." So yeah. That was weird. Then on another occasion, she started asking intimate questions about how we conceived. And then I'm like, I don't think that's a conversation I want to have with our baby's future grandma. And she goes, "Oh no, I'm not grandma." And I'm like, okie dokie. I mean, I get it. Some women don't like being called grandma. I've heard Nana, CC, Glamma, or Diva, but I didn't ask what she wanted to be called in that moment. I couldn't have cared less in that moment. Then she started calling him babe/baby/daddy. And daddy. Daddy was interesting because she said it with this weird tone. But she was never overly excited to be a grandma. She was excited to have a baby in the house again. As if it was her house. She never called herself a grandma or a grandparent. Someone once cracked a joke and was like, "Ooh, I bet grandma's really excited and she's like a mama." And then they were like, "I think mama is usually reserved for the actual mother there, Barb." And people just sort of laughed it off. Another time, I want to say that I didn't catch her drinking my mother's milk tea. If you don't know, this tea helps pregnant women in their breastfeeding journey and helps them produce breast milk. Boo, and I'm pretty sure I caught her taking a box from my stash of tea. I know I had bought 3 boxes to prepare. She went into the cupboard earlier to grab something. And then when I went in there later, the boxes just sort of caught my attention. A few days later, we were at their place, and I went to throw out some used tissues in the garbage and saw a ripped mother's milk tea bag packet in the garbage. I really want to say that I hope she's not drinking it. Why would she be drinking that? Is she trying to produce milk? God, I hope not. That's next level. So then skip to giving birth. She insisted on being there, and granted, Jake actually called her for help because baby was coming earlier than planned and my mom was still out of town. So while we're in the room and I'm having contractions, instead of just sitting there quietly or helping me, she was standing next to Jake. She's basically wrapped around him, she's holding his hand, and the whole thing is just making me nauseous. When he's finally sleeping and trying to get some rest, I see her rubbing his leg. And in his sleep, he's pushing her away. Every time she did, he immediately moved away from her and you could tell it was bothering him, but he didn't say anything. Then I finally say, "Hey, can you go get some ice chips?" So she leaves to go and I'm like, "Hey Jake, can you tell your mom to leave? She's making me uncomfortable." And so when she came back he told her to come back when things were ramping up. At first she tried to fight him about it but she eventually left. We didn't end up telling her when things were ramping up and she didn't come back until baby was here, so ha. But then when she finally gets to see baby, she goes, "Oh, they look just like me, hey Jake?" Whatever. I don't see it. Now fast forward to 2 days ago. My mom has gone back home. She stayed with us for a few months while we were getting used to a new normal with baby. Mill suggests she come over to be at the house while baby sleeps and we go out for a little date night. Jake says this is a great idea so we get going. We have a lovely night. Like honestly so in love and everything feels right. We come back home and we are like, "Hey, we're home." But no one answers us. And we're like, "K weird." Then we're like, "Barb? Hello?" Still nothing. In my mind I'm like, wow, this bitch has literally kidnapped our baby and God knows what she's done with it or where she is. So then we go upstairs and Jake checks our baby's room and I immediately go to our master and I see Mill pleasuring herself on our bed. I literally scream and shut the door. She screams. Jake comes over and he's like, what? And he goes to open the door and I'm like, no. And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, Your mom is in there and she's touching." And he goes, "What?" And then Barb calls out from the room and she's like, "I didn't expect you guys to be home so soon." And Jake's like, "Mom, get the fuck out here now." And then she comes out after a couple of minutes. And Jake's like, "What the hell were you doing in there?" And she goes, "I was just passing the time, trying out some of your stuff." And I'm like, "My stuff?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, I'll wash it." And I'm like, "Excuse me?" And Jake's like, "Mom, no. Jesus." And she literally is looking at us like we're the psychos here. Then I'm like, "Mill, you need to leave. I don't trust you with our baby. I don't trust you with my husband. You've really crossed a line tonight." Then Jake is just like, "WTF mom. WTF. She plays dumb, ends up leaving 10 minutes later. So yeah. Ida? Edit, I do not want this kind of behavior around our child. It makes me uncomfortable that she is acting sexually towards my husband, and if he won't defend himself, I will step in to protect him. Not only that, but if she's this way with my Jakey, then who's to say what she's going to be like with our baby? And now I feel just horrific for leaving our baby with her. Who knows what she did or could have done. Update 1. Okay, so a bunch of you have told me the obvious. I'm not the a-hole. But I feel like the a-hole for not saying something sooner. For not stepping up for Jake when he needed someone too. He hasn't actually opened up to me about how he's been treated by his mom his whole life, but we're working on going to therapy together and individually. Not only that, but we went NC with Jake's mom and his Phil came over to talk to us. We told him literally everything. Everything. And Jake and him even went into a separate room and had their own conversation. His Phil ended up apologizing to us both, but to specifically Jake. He feels awful for not seeing all of the warning signs earlier on and for not doing anything and protecting him from that abuse. His Phil went and rented an apartment for Mill to move into. They're going to be selling that house that they live in and they're currently going through a separation. Phil filed for a divorce and he knows because Mill has never worked a day in her life, he has to give her basically everything, so he's not stoked about that because she doesn't deserve a cent. But yeah, so they're not living together. And basically it's starting to go around town just how weird she's been. And some of the football moms out there have even said that they thought that she was weird and overstepped her role as a trusted adult in the community. I guess someone who Jake used to play football with said that his mom made a move on him and touched him inappropriately. So now that's being investigated. I hate the fact that we share a name with this woman. And I hate myself for not saying something sooner. Update 2. Well, Mill was charged by that man who Jake used to play with back in junior high. In fact, she's going away for 30 years. When she was going through trial, she asked that Phil and family be there to support her, and that was a huge joke. Jake and his dad are slowly getting back on track and trying to repair what's there. Jake's dad is really trying, and he's even started going to therapy himself. Jake and I have been continuing with therapy and we're doing really good. Jake seems to feeling much better, he seems lighter. Not holding things in. He doesn't look like he's carrying on to anything. Our communication is doing great. It's going to be a journey, but we're ready for what's ahead. We're welcoming this new chapter with open arms. We're just all moving forward and loving our new little normal. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Hired a private investigator after suspecting my wife was cheating. I caught her with her boss, got them fired, and exposed their office affair and left her penniless. My wife and I met 8 years ago in a bar. She was attractive and single, and so was I. We hit it off, and after that, we pursued a relationship together. She gave me some of the best years of my life. I started a family with her and I really thought that we were going to grow together. Unfortunately, I found out that she was having an affair with her boss, and because of that we divorced. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to experience, and I just want to find a way to move on from it. But here's the story anyway. We had just bought a house and we were undergoing a lot of stress with remodeling and moving. On top of that, both my wife and I were working a lot in our respective careers to try to make our way up the ladder. I work as a copywriter, and she is a journalist. She was very close with her boss and all the other employees at the paper she worked for. I know that she saw her boss as sort of a mentor for her when she started. He helped her master writing in her field, and he often gave her special stories to cover that fit her interests. I knew the man well also. He was a widower, and my wife had a lot of sympathy for him because she was worried about him being alone all the time. His children had moved out of the house and he lived by himself. At first, I thought that the relationship was harmless. Years had gone by and he was more of a father figure to her than anything else. Finding out that he was the person that she had been having an affair with was beyond shocking. I started to notice that things were off when she was spending more time in the office. Her job is easily one that she doesn't even have to go in for. She has a home office that she can work from whenever she wants to, but she chooses to go in because it helps her focus and she enjoys socializing with her coworkers. When she told me that she would have to be staying late, I questioned why she wouldn't just come home and work in the office. Certainly, that was better than staying in an office building by herself. She could have had dinner with her family and then went right to work. Having it happen one time would have been something to forget about, but when she was staying late in the office 2 or 3 times a week, I had some red flags waving. Normally, I wouldn't assume that she was cheating on me. But I had read a lot of Reddit posts and confessions from people who were being cheated on. I started to worry if maybe that was the case here. I honestly didn't even know where to begin with trying to find out if she was cheating on me. I decided that the best thing to do would be just to observe some of her habits and behaviors and see if everything was all in my head. The more I watched her, the more I realized there might have been something going on. Another thing that I noticed was how she would tilt her phone away from me when she looked at it. It was odd. That wasn't something she had ever done before that I was aware of. If she wasn't trying to hide anything, I didn't understand why she would tilt it. I was starting to work myself up thinking that she was having an affair, so I decided to take the plunge and hire someone who could dig around. I found a local private investigator who took on the case. After I told him everything I was suspicious about, he decided that the best place to start would be at her work. He waited outside around the end of her workday to see if he could follow her and see where she was going. On the second day that he was working, I got a text message from my wife telling me that she would be staying late in the office. I immediately told the private investigator about that so they would keep a close eye on her building to see where she went if she left. However, she didn't leave the office. When she eventually did, the private investigator followed her to our house. It seemed like she really was staying late at the office. I told the private investigator that I was clearly in the wrong for what I was doing and I wanted to call them off. They ended up convincing me that there still could have been something going on in the office. I thought it was silly, but I told them that I would pay for another day just to rule that out, and then if they didn't find anything I would terminate our contract. Sadly, they found something. My wife was yet again staying late in the office and the private investigator found her in her boss's office performing oral sex on him. He got some pictures and videos of it for me. When he showed me, I was shocked and disturbed and I felt like the world was falling out from under my feet. I had my suspicions, but I never wanted to confirm them. Part of me had been hoping that hiring the private investigator would just prove that my wife was faithful. Her boss was like a father figure to her, so I couldn't comprehend how they even started an affair. Regardless of my confusion, I was done with her. I had given her everything I possibly could and she was throwing it back in my face. I felt a lot of pity for myself, but after wallowing in that for a while I was angry. I wanted to show them that they couldn't both just treat me the way they did without there being consequences. There was a rival newspaper in the area that I remembered my wife always talking about. Her paper and the other were always trying to one-up each other. I had the perfect story for them. Before I sent an article to the rival magazine, I met with the hour manager of the newspaper my wife worked at. I told them about everything that happened and how they were having sex in the office, showing them the evidence. It was a clear violation of their policy and they assured me that they would both be dealt with. 2 days after I did that, my wife came home in tears complaining about how she was fired. She didn't tell me what happened, she lied and said that she was laid off due to budget cuts. I was partially surprised that she continued with the lie, but at the same time, she had already lied so much. When I knew that she was fired, I sent an email to the newspaper. I got a response saying that they were going to cover the story, but they needed to put a spin on it to make it more marketable. Otherwise, it would have just looked like revenge porn. The story that they ran with was about a boss sleeping with his worker and getting them both fired. They put the picture I attached in, though they blurred the faces of my wife and her boss. Because my wife worked for the rival paper, we never had that one at home. However, that morning I made a special stop to go and grab the latest issue of the newspaper. I sat right at the kitchen table and opened it up in front of her while I drank my coffee. Right on the back of the paper was the article with a picture of her in her boss's office performing sexual acts on him. She nearly spit out her coffee when she saw it. She yanked it out of my hand and read the article while I sat there with my arms crossed in front of me. She didn't say anything, probably because she didn't think I realized what was on the paper. As she was reading it, I commented on how funny it was that the article mentioned a boss and an employee getting fired the very same day that she was. That clued her into my knowledge about her affair. She tried to explain herself and told me that it was a one-time thing, but I didn't believe her. She was mad that I had the article published. It's hindsight, I do feel like I went a little too far with that. We lived in a small town and everybody saw that article. It wouldn't have taken a lot of brain power to figure out who it was. We ended up getting a divorce. We had a prenup, so thankfully I didn't owe her anything. We sold the house and split everything down the middle. It's just hard to believe that something like this would happen to me. I've been loyal and trustworthy throughout our entire marriage and I never expected that. I know it's going to take a lot to move on from, but I'm hoping I can heal soon.